It's Wednesday, October the 13th. Lake levels, it's actually come down a few inches. It's right at 915, which is normal for what's called winter power pool. Water temperature's actually starting to come down a little bit. You know, rain pretty much all day today. It's supposed to rain tonight. So that ought to help cool the water temperature down. But for the most part, the water's in the low 70s, 70 to 72 degrees throughout the lake. Even if it cools it down, I don't think there's going to be a real big change in the fishing real quick. I think it's going to take, we need a water temperature change. We need to get the lake cooled down. Then I think it's going to take several days, up maybe a week, before you start seeing the fish respond to the cooler temperatures. I think for the most part, I know I've been saying it the last few weeks, but I think fishing's really tough. And I was down at the Champion Charger tournament this weekend. I was actually helping out on the live release boat. And I was really impressed for the conditions that we had, how tough the fishing's been. There was a lot of limits of fish caught. The weights were kind of really stacked up there around 11 pounds or so, but there was some pretty decent bags, several 13, 14 pound bags for this time of year. But, one thing I noticed, it was, especially the first part of the weigh-in, they had almost 200 boats in the tournament. So I'd say the first 100 boats or so, when they got through weighing, it was a lot of smallmouth and a lot of good quality smallmouth. And it seemed like the later flights had a lot more largemouth. But anyways, as far as catching them, some of my previous reports, I've been talking about a square bill up in the Stained River and the river arms, and a whopper plopper bite a little bit. But we've had beautiful conditions for topwater the last few days, and my shallow topwater bite seems to be getting worse and worse, down to almost just a couple fish in the first couple hours. And I do believe that's going to get better. I don't know what it's going to take for sure, other than the water temperature to cool down. Just doesn't seem like there's a ton of fish up there real shallow. The most consistent bite for me the last few days has been a jig, primarily a football jig, and catching all three species, but depends where you are on the lake, and it depends on the sunshine too. Like yesterday, where it was bluebird skies, no wind, seemed like a lot of the fish were pretty deep, out to as far as 40 feet, but it seemed like 25 to 40 feet. Today, where it was overcast, it seemed like it was about 28 to 30 feet. They were a little bit shallower. But, a lot of them, they're kind of in different areas. A lot of them are out on them long, flat, what we call gravel runouts, but long, flat gravel points where it breaks off into deep water. But the key seems to be on these points, you got to find a little bit bigger rock out on the ends of these points, or brush, or a combination of both. It seems like not getting that many bites on just real flat, smooth gravel. It's got to have a little bit of ledge rock or chunk mixed in it, which, it's hard to find out there unless you structure scan a lot of it, or just fish it till you get to them, I would kind of call them sweet spots within a spot. But you'll find a little group of bigger rock out there on them points. And if you're looking at that on your mapping, on your sonar units, place that I would start, if you find them long points where they come all the way out. I catch it a few on the sides, but the best part of them seems to be right on the tip of the points. And like I say, anywhere from, some days 22 out to as deep as 40 feet. But I find like I got to cover quite a few of those points to get bites. And today, for some reason, it seemed like there was a lot more short fish. We had to catch several short fish before we caught keepers. But, all three species are out there. And there is some fish shallow too if you do the same thing, but stay on transition banks in the creeks where it goes from chunk to gravel. And there's some fish in that, 5 to 20 foot range on like a quarter ounce, 5/16 or 3/8, like finesse jig with a little critter craw. You can even catch them on a shaky head. You might try a Ned rig, but it's, painstakingly slow, and The good thing about it, whether you're out fishing deep or shallow like that, when you do get one bite, you usually get a couple bites. Now, like I say, the topwater bite, we had a perfect day for throwing a spinnerbait. We had wind, rain, clouds. Just could not hardly get them to bite a spinnerbait. We had a few early in the morning, but once we got past that, it seems like they're not on them places where you would normally catch them on a topwater, or a spinnerbait, on the secondary and main lake points, on the bluff ends. Seeing very few schooling fish. The one thing I did see quite a bit more today was a lot more shad up there suspended in the water column, that 10, 15 foot range. And normally when I see that, I'll take and throw a swim bait, like a 3.2 Kitech or a Rage swimmer or something similar to that, or I'll throw a 4 or 5 inch big swim bait like a Zoom swimmer on a 1/2 ounce head, and try to figure out how deep the shad are and work that swim bait through and around the shad. Now, a couple times on them big groups of shad today, I could see that there was fish feeding underneath them, because you could see on the live scope, you could see when the shad would disperse and there'd be like a hole in the middle of the big group of shad. But by the time I got a bait out there, it seemed like either the shad moved or dispersed, or the fish went back down to the bottom. Now, some of the fish that we caught on a jig today were underneath those big schools of shad. The shad might have been up there 10 or 15 foot, but the fish were down there on a jig. And it doesn't seem like any certain color. I've been throwing like a 5/8 or a 3/4. PBJ, green pumpkin purple. We threw a green pumpkin orange, multiple trailers, and we even caught some on a Carolina rig. Carolina rig, I'm using a 3/4 ounce weight. Good bait to use, like a Zoom speed craw. I could even use a lizard, or even a twin tail chompers. Will work in the same areas, or just like a little stick worm, like a Cinco. Green pumpkins, watermelon reds are hard to beat. But, and there's some drop shot fish out there. I just seem like I just can't catch the quality of the fish, and I have more fish looking at the drop shot than I do biting it, or when I do get them to bite, they seem like they're smaller. But they've been out on them same type of points. There is some out in the center of the creek, over the top of deep trees. But the same place I'm football jigging, sometimes I'll see what I feel is drop shot fish. I'll pick up a drop shot rig and throw like a Chomper's brown purple laminated worm, or a little Strike King not sexy dog. It's a Morning Dawn color, but it's a KVD. Heck, I don't remember what they call the drop shot worm. But anyways, the little Strike King Morning Dawn. But that 4.5 inch Chompers brown purple lamb will work good as well, or a plum, a little 1/4 ounce weight. And the fish just seem to be just off the bottom on that gravel. If you see them down there, 25, 35 feet, just drop the bait down the bottom and pick it up a couple feet. Also, I wanted to mention the guys that are in town pre-fishing for the Johnny Morris U.S. Bass Pro Open. If you're down at Extreme Outdoors and you're buying any tackle, if you'll sign your receipt, they have a bait bucket down there. They put your receipt with your name in it in the bait bucket, and they're going to have several drawings. And a lot of the drawings are going to be $100 tackle packs, gift certificates, different things like that. So if you're going to be down in the area spending money on the lake, go to Extreme Outdoors. You got a chance of winning some money or product back. But like I said, I think this cooler temperature is definitely going to help. But I don't think it's going to be like turning the light switch on. I think it's going to be gradually, as far as the fishing picking up. We have been throwing a rock crawler, a Spro rock crawler, and a wiggle wart some. But it seems like, we got to cover a lot of water to get a few fish on it. Now, one place I have been getting a little bit better jig bite is like on channel, like a bluff end where there's a gravel flat that comes up against it, or the same thing I was talking about on these long flat points, but if you've got a main river that swings in against it where it's gravel on one side and then ledge rock on the other, where you know you got a drastic depth change, that seems to be a little bit better, something to key on. But you'll feel it in there when you start working down off that gravel and get into that bigger ledge rock. Another thing that'll work out there is like a, I don't know if I have one right here. It's like a Magnum shaky head. Five Fish Lures makes one. We've got them in 1/2 ounce, 5/8 and 3/4, and a Magnum trick worm, or just a Zoom mag trick worm. It's a little bit fatter bait. The Magnum trick worm is a little bit longer than the Magnum finesse worm. Finesse worm is about, I think, 4.5 or 5 inches. But I've been using that same places that I've been using a jig. The little Pee-wee jewel jig will work as well too. You know, like a little 7/16 if you're fishing lighter line. But you know, like I say, I just think it's an extremely tough bite. Just gotta, when you get into the area where you feel the fish are, or you see the bait or getting some bites, I think you need to slow down, fish it real thorough. Because the good thing is, when you find a few, you know, find a fish, there seems to be a few in that same area. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.